My talk is on the employer branding triangle between engineering, content, and HR. And it's based on a talk they've already given a number of times at HR conferences, engineering conferences, tech conferences. But this one has been revamped for the DevRel community since recently myself and my team have become a part of it. And that's why we wanted to be at the conference. That's why I wanted to actually meet you. But hey, we'll see each other in Yokohama, I guess. We'll see. As a short intro, if you, after the talk, need to ask me anything, you can use this email or you can tweet me on Twitter. Hopefully, Musk doesn't ban me in between this and the finish of my talk. You can also call me IBB since I do have a complex Balkan name and surname. Anyways, I'm the founding editor of Netokracija. For those who aren't from Southeastern Europe, Netokracija is the leading tech magazine in the region. So it's basically like the TechCrunch of the region. We've written about tech startups, scale-ups, engineering companies for more than a decade. We've been part of the community. We have offices in Zagreb, Osijek, and in Belgrade. And basically, if anything has been written about the local and regional tech community, we were the ones probably doing it. And it's a really cool magazine. I would suggest you check it out at netokracija.com and netokracija.rs. You can always use Google Translate to read in English, although we will have something in English very soon. And this is my very nice team that actually through the years has learned how to target an audience that we all want to target. And that's, of course, engineers. And not all content creators can do that. Unfortunately, most media cannot create content for developers, but we manage to. We work with all the top tech companies in Croatia and Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, and so on, working with them to create employer branding campaigns for, again, more than a decade. We were the first ones to do native content, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a lot of experience there. Now, for years, this was the setup. We were a good team. It was working out, bootstrapped, profitable, and proud, baby. And then something happened. Basically, we got acquired. We got acquired this year by Infobip as a media publication. For those of you who haven't yet met Julia and Ivan Buraz and the rest of the team, Mike and everyone who is Joe and everyone who is there at DevRel Con, Infobip is the world's leading communication platform. And we were acquired as part of a strategy to create an even better developer experience team or department. So basically at Infobip, the setup is we are one of the teams in charge of developer content. That's my team. And we, of course, try to target developers as much as we can. Along with those two permanent roles, I've been an employer branding consultant for some of the larger enterprises in the region, working with A1 Telecom in Austria and Croatia, Raiffeisen Bank across the region in Romania, Croatia, and so on, helping them to reach engineers. Because, of course, corporates are having a hard time hiring engineers, and they do need some help. So we do have a bit of experience with employer branding. Also, recently, I've started a blog. It has no content, but if you do want to subscribe after the talk, go to engineerseditor.com and subscribe to the newsletter. Enough self-promotion and intro. What I'm going to talk about in this talk is three things. First of all, who owns employer branding? I think it's very important for you to understand if you want to create employer branding content, what your role is, and do you own it? Does someone else? And how do you basically work that out? Second of all, we'll do a deep dive into DevRel's strategic role for employer branding, because I do think after all this decade of experience working with both small companies, large companies, enterprises, I think DevRel has a strategic role in employer branding. And third, I would like to give you some tactical advice to create content, specifically employer branding content. So let's go. Who owns employer branding? Well, a decade ago, the question was completely different. It was who owns social media? So the issue was that in 2009, 2010, a lot of different departments were looking at social media as an opportunity. Okay, we can do marketing here, we can do support, et cetera, but no one was really in charge of it. Does that sound familiar? So It's not Elon Musk owning social media. It's maybe marketing. So marketing saw Facebook, they saw Twitter, they saw, well, they didn't see TikTok, it wasn't around yet, but they saw the marketing potential. So they said, social media, that's mine. I want to achieve my strategic goals of getting to users by using social media for marketing. On the other hand, you had support. For the first time, social media let us hear users' opinions, help them with their issues, answer questions. So support said, oh, maybe we should own it because that's a channel for us to give our customers feedback. Maybe that works. And also you had, of course, HR coming in and saying, we could use this to hire. Because again, if your company has a LinkedIn page, I'm 90% sure that HR probably owns it, kind of, sort of, right? Everyone owns every different social media platform, but LinkedIn, that's HR first in most organizations. Having that in mind, what's the situation currently? Who owns employer branding in a tech company? So here we come to the crux of the problem, something I call the Bermuda Triangle of employer branding. This is an illustration done by a Montenegrin artist called Zombiana. She's very talented. And it explains, in my opinion, the concept of what happens in a typical tech company when engineering tries to hire more engineers. So we have developers at the top in the clouds, of course. They ask HR, oh, HR, we need to recruit more engineers. Go, recruit, do your stuff, right? We need more engineers. HR says, okay, that's fine. We can post some job ads as you do. But it's a very competitive market. We need to do more. We need to create content. And they tell engineering, well, we need content. And engineering says, we don't have time for that. We have some other goal, strategic, whatever. We don't have time to create the content that you need. Find a solution. And then HR sighs, and goes to marketing and tells marketing, oh, you know how to do content. Can you help? And marketing says, no, we like developers, those like scary beasts, that different user target. We don't know how to talk to them. Do it yourself. And marketing size and HR size and developer size and all the potential content that could be created for developers ends up stuck in the Bermuda Triangle. As you can see, the LinkedIn's, the YouTube videos, Instagram posts, and text blog posts, they're all drowning in the Bermuda Triangle. So it's so sad, really. But let's take it a step further. Let's take it to your companies, dev first companies. Who owns employer branding in dev first companies? Well, let's replace marketing with DevRel. Let's replace it with you guys and gals and everybody at the conference. So the same thing happens. And again, the engineering and HR might ask you, oh, can you help with recruiting? And this is happening more and more. Talking to colleagues from the region, what I've gotten the info is, oh, we get pinged from HR, from engineering, from leadership that we should help communicate to developers because of course, we're in the community. But is that our job? I'm not sure. Because again, I'm not saying that HR does a bad job. I'm not saying that employer branding does a bad job. Actually, InfoBeep's employer branding team just won an award yesterday, I think, at the Employer Branding Awards regionally. So they're doing a good job. But again, they ask for help. So what's the difference between HR and DevRel? Or when I'm saying HR, also think of like for employer branding teams. If you have a dedicated team for employer branding in your company, for example, if we do have a dedicated employer branding team, these gals and guys. So here are some of the differences. For HR, the issue is that whatever they do, they're always focused on their internal community, right? They're not focused on external developer community. The issues that I've had as a consultant for a lot of companies is that when HR is working on how to craft content for developers, it's always very internal. It's like stuff that they appreciate inside the company, but when you explore it in the community, it's not interesting. A very simple example, the community is growing in Croatia and Serbia and so on. And 5 years ago, it was very cool to have whole articles about, oh, we have this brand new space. We have this brand new office. It's so cool. We have craft beer and everything else, what was in. Um, and fine, at that time, it was interesting content maybe, but now a lot of HR people are still trying to promote that in the developer community. And most developers say, so what? Everyone else is doing it. Why should we care? So they're focused on internal things a lot, which is, I think, natural because HR is an internal focused department. On the other hand, we have us, we have you, we have DevRel. You're focused, yes, on internal, of course. You have to start from the internal developer community, but they're also very focused on the external community, on the developers at events. You're building your own communities, as we heard in the talk before. So this is in a very extreme division. HR with extreme focus on internal, DevRel very focused on external. On the content side, HR has its own types of content. It has its career pages, job ads, and so on. And these are the things that are very natural to HR. They own them, obviously, but they're not something that you and DevRel might want to do if you're not posting jobs for your own team, obviously. And it's not that you're creating this type of content daily. HR is. So they own that content. And on the other hand, DevRel owns devlogs, docs, everything that is, again, is very dev focused, which HR should be doing, but just doesn't own it because, again, we have different ownerships. When we come to events, and this is a photo from InfoBeep's Shift conference from this year, please do join us next year as well. We also have a divide. HR will go to events to hire. The types of events that HR goes to and recruiting goes to is different than the ones that you go to recruit users. It's different geographically, it's different in focus. For example, you might want to focus on a principal engineer, on a, I wouldn't say typical engineer, but like engineers that are individual contributors, while someone else, or in this case, HR, wants to focus, for example, on engineering leadership or on students. You do want to go to developer events, but you're going to completely different spaces. As I said, DevRel goes to users. And this is a big divide. So if we even look at websites, for example, with us, with promoting InfoBeep to developers, DevRel is focusing on developers as users. And of course, what HR does is it promotes its own, basically, story, its own, its pitch. Its CTA is a employer value proposition. So they have their pitch that shows the company as a great employer. This pitch, in most cases, in 90% of cases, does not, I wouldn't say doesn't align, but has a completely different focus than your pitch, because you're pitching the company as a platform, maybe. You're pitching an API. The pitches are completely different. We can look at some websites later, but it's all a matter actually of priorities. If we look at Kiwi, one of the sponsors of this event, Kiwi Jobs, the focus on the jobs website when you go under engineering is, of course, getting engineers to apply for jobs. The copy is focused on that. The value proposition is focused on that. Everything is focused on hiring engineers, which is kind of obvious. On the other hand, if we look at developer pages and websites and so on, for example, IDEN, again, present event, it's a completely different call to action. And it's very hard to combine these two. The important thing to keep in mind, I think, is that your OKR, your goal, is not their goal. So if the company, the leadership comes to you to create employer branding content, it's not something you actually want to focus on. I mentioned marketing before. So at one of the companies that I work with, one of the bigger telecoms in the region, when I was talking with HR to try to get marketing to help with the developer content, the CMO told me, even I understand the issue. I want to help, but this is like 5% of my budget. I don't care. For me, it's not my goal. It's not that important. In the end, their must-have hiring engineers is your nice-to-have. And this is very important to have in mind, especially in a downturn. We heard yesterday how it's important to go back to our origin story, right? To get back to some basics. In a downturn, you can't really focus on multiple things. You need to focus on your core goals, on what you're here to do. And I'm not sure hiring was in your job description, right? So what does DevRel do? What is your origin story? Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, or fortunately maybe, DevRel shouldn't own employer branding content for developers because it's not your strategic goal. It's not something that you should do, should own. Someone should delegate it to you. You can help, but it's not something you should own. But here's what you could do instead. Because honestly, HR and employer branding need both you and me. Because when we look at the content that comes out of employer branding and HR departments, copy, so on, in a lot of cases, it's prone to writing fiction. Again, I mentioned HR is a very internal focused department. And a lot of cases, the stuff that comes in is true if for the people that are in the company, that are in the like reality distortion field of the company, they're part of the team. But when you try to write that content for outsiders, it doesn't work. It sounds like fiction. And we've had this experience at Netocracia. We've had briefs from companies that are really good, but the content that they come to us with wouldn't fly with the community, wouldn't fly with developers who are, of course, a bit more critical. Again, HR is mostly not dev first, but there is something in between that we can work on because I do think there's a love story here. I think that HR and or employer branding and DevRel can work together very nicely. It can be a happier story than this one, but hey, I had to use some picture. So employer branding can be a byproduct of great dev content, and also employer branding can foster and create great dev content. So how do you do that? How do you create great dev content with employer branding by your side? For one thing, you can focus on big evergreen wins. So what does that mean? In my opinion, if you want to do employer branding content as DevRel, you can't be doing it every week. You can't be doing it every month because, again, in a downturn, it's not your focus. What you can do is a couple of times a year, have big projects that can be evergreen that then HR or employer branding can run with, and basically you can help them create it and then delegate running it to them. So what do I mean by this? So one project that we did even before Inflip acquired Netocracia is the Inflip Engineering Handbook. So Inflip had this issue. They were hiring a lot of engineers across the world. They started doing DevRel and everything else. But again, they needed some kind of content to help hire engineers. And they actually hired me before the acquisition as a consultant and we worked together. And the question was, okay, what kind of content can we create that will actually make an impact? Because the first thing was, we should do blog posts and events and so on. Cool. We don't have the budget for it. We don't have the focus for it. We don't have the people for it yet. We need one thing that can like be an evergreen big win. And that thing was actually the Inflip Engineering Handbook inspired by GitLab, actually. So what we did is we did a workshop. We brought in engineering, we brought employer branding, we brought it HR for a 3-day workshop. And in 3 days, just 3 days, believe me, I have videos somewhere to prove it. We created the whole Inflip Engineering Handbook that now, on a daily basis, is used by recruiting globally as a reference point for engineers. When engineers are being recruited, when they're asking about questions from culture to how we deploy stuff and so on, we actually just send them a link to this. And again, it's something that's evergreen, that gets updated, that we as developer experience don't have to work on daily, but it gets the job done. So if you can find those big wins, it can work really well. Because again, there's not enough employer branding content in most engineering companies, and these big projects can really help, and you can get them done fast. The second thing is supercharging advocacy with employer branding. What do I mean by this? Well, here are maybe not most, but a lot of Infobip's engineers at our yearly dev conference, Dev Days. Here you might see 900 engineers. What I see is 900 dev bloggers, right? We heard in the talk before about how we can use advocacy in the community. We heard yesterday how we can supercharge advocacy. The thing is that as DevRel, you're really good at running advocacy programs, which is awesome. The even more important thing is you can use employer branding's basically influence and budget to help foster these advocacy programs. So For example, for what I found is that for a lot of engineering managers and engineering teams, they will understand hiring as a goal before understanding like how we get developers as users. So, for example, I've been talking to all of InfoBeep's engineering managers, and all of them say, oh, we need to work on retention, we need to work on recruiting. That's their focus because they're engineering managers. And when we explain that, oh, we can create content to help you with these basically employer branding goals, they say, let's do it. And what happens is we create content that actually helps with DevRel, that helps with developer marketing, that helps with developer experience. So we have the example of the handbook, right? So we got engineering on it. And we have another example. This is a couple of the guys from InfoBeep Engineering. We had a workshop a couple of weeks ago because they had an issue. They wanted to work on employer branding content as a team to create it to help them as a team recruit better because it's hard. And what we ended up doing is doing a workshop where they created articles that are going to be published. And what's the result? We're going to get content that helps them with employer branding content, and that helps us with our goal, and that's developer content to promote InfoBeep as a platform for users. So basically, you and I work hand in hand with employer branding, achieve your goals while helping them achieve theirs. But it's important that sometimes you might need to pitch the stuff you want to achieve as an employer branding or hiring thing than a DevRel thing. Because a lot of engineers, a lot of engineering managers might understand hiring before they understand dev marketing. And this leads us to one of the things that I like doing is combining budgets, right? So DevRel, dev marketing, everyone has their budget, especially in large organizations. But again, employer branding has their own budget. HR has their own budget. Why shouldn't we combine budgets to create even better projects, right? So I'm a very big proponent of working with different teams and departments to combine resources, not just budgets, but people, time, and so on, to create something better that can achieve all our goals. So I'm not sure how many of you have watched Captain Planet in your youth. I hope some have watched Cartoon Network, which has recently been closed. So sad. But let our powers be combined and our budgets be combined and our resources be combined so we can create projects like the handbook, the blogs, the podcasts, and so on. And with this kind of stuff, what you can do is actually focus on areas that you usually wouldn't have the resources to do. One area that I would suggest you focus on is actually paid media. So from what I've seen, and I've tried to educate myself more about DevRel and building dev communities and so on, which is normal, you're very community focused, right? Everything is either own media, it's shared media, we're building our own communities, we're participating in other communities. And when it comes to paid stuff, it's mostly like sponsorships of events. I haven't seen that much of basically native advertising. I haven't seen a lot of you doing things that companies do when they're doing advertising in the media. If you do paid, it's most like maybe Facebook ads, Instagram ads, maybe Reddit, something like that. But one thing you should explore in 2023, especially because it's downturn, so you might get a bigger discount, is paid media. It's reaching out to different media outlets, Netocratia included, and basically working with them to create articles that are written by experts, by other writers, and using the expertise that the employer branding has in HR for that kind of stuff to, again, achieve your goals. So we've done a lot of this at Netocratia. Here are some examples of articles. Unfortunately, in Croatian, again, we're a local media company. So they're articles that have been written to promote these companies as employers. But if you do the same thing for outlets in English or wherever you're maybe trying to promote your platform, it can be LATAM, it can be the US, it can be Asia. If you do the same thing with, for example, in Asia, you can do it with Tech in Asia, right? If you're doing it in Africa, you can do it with Tech Cable. You can achieve basically awareness of your platform through other media platforms, something that I, again, haven't seen done as much in DevRel. So how does it work at InfoBeep? Just to get to my point. We have InfoBeep developers. So DevRel, you've met probably Julia and Joe, Mike, and so on. We have my team. We're doing developer content. You have Startup Tribe. They work with startups. And of course, you have our Shift team and Shift conferences happening in Zadar and hopefully all around the world, as well as meetups in the US. What's important with all these things when you're trying to create employer branding content is that everything you do, every project that you do, and so on, shouldn't, again, when you're doing employer branding, shouldn't be owned by you, but you can use these projects to further your goals. And you can promote some different goals that you might have, for example, promoting your team as a part of a bigger project that's more focused on employer branding.